All right, salute that. It's your man DJ Seko Varner. I'm on the Fly Guys podcast with my girl Queen Starr Armstrong. Salute that. How you doing? Seems to be a bit of a delay. Do you hear me, Starr?
I hear you.
Cool. And my man Dan Trez Omi. What's good?
Peace. Happy belated Father's Day, by the way.
Oh, same to you, man. Same to you.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Seko did a wonderful interview with me. We had a fatherhood conversation. What did I do? 8 fathers in 4 days? Yeah.
And I tell you what, all of the interviews just excellent. She knocked it out of the park. The content was very highbrow, and it was also, presented in a way where a common person can understand it. It was excellent. I think she should get a Emmy Award for it.
What platform is this on?
It's on Facebook. I need to put it on my YouTube, but it is.
Ooh, Facebook. Ooh.
I know y'all Facebook haters, but Wise Intelligent was one of the
okay.
As well, yeah. So you definitely want to check it out. I'll let you know when I put it on YouTube.
All right. Well, if we're gonna do some plugs, me and my son just did because the 20th anniversary of Black Star is coming out. We did a Father's Day special on my podcast where he and I reviewed Black Star. So it was pretty dope. He's 20. He just turned 24 2 days ago. When he was 14, he and I did a review on it. So that was like 10 years ago. So I thought it'd be dope. We do it just in time for the 20th anniversary. So, yep. So where my killer tape at, the latest episode, Father's Day special. Yeah, it's dope. It's really dope. And it's not on Facebook.
Please send links.
I can do that.
Okay.
I can do that. If you follow my podcast, where my killer tape at, everybody should be listening to it.
Yeah, let me know. I wasn't aware. So
right? Hey, everybody should be listening, right?
You know why she wasn't aware? Because she's on Facebook.
Oh, that's right. Oh, you on Facebook with all those.
Look, I don't love Facebook, so y'all can throw all the shots you want to. I don't love it. I'm not here to defend it.
Okay, right. That's why she ain't on my killer tape at. All right.
Well, interestingly enough, Nicki Minaj gave a statement, it looks like, where she was saying that she was a little disturbed. You saw that?
Yeah, she got dragged for that. She got dragged for that on Twitter. That's actually like old news. So she got dragged last week for that. So
all right. You're the king of Twitter, man. So what did Twitter say?
They dragged her, man. They dragged her, man. They were just, a lot of us do that. A lot of us, as we get older, and I think a lot of it has to do with having a lot of regrets. A lot of it has to do with, as you get older, you really start to delve in respectability politics, and you start making these statements that are actually not cool. So, and I think it's real easy, to really blame sex workers for this stuff, to really be misogynistic towards women, particularly women of color, when it comes to sex work, and try to kind of throw shade on them. And I think she really denigrated sex work. She really did. For someone who promoted and said that, sex work is okay, for her to turn around and say, that stuff is horrible and da-da-da-da, and you shouldn't do that. It was really fucked up. It's really messed up. So she got dragged for that.
Interesting. So she feels responsible for creating modern day prostitutes.
Pretty much. Which is a word we should not use. We should use, it's called sex work. It's sex work. All of that is sex work.
All right. Why shouldn't we use the term prostitute? Because it has a negative connotation?
It does. It has a negative connotation. It puts all the onus on the sex workers and not the men or the Johns that actually, here's an example. It's probably a horrible analogy, right? There's a market for chocolate-covered insects, right?
Okay.
Right? A lot of times we like to blame instead of saying we should put the onus on the people that consume chocolate-covered insects, right? Or ants or whatever. We like to blame the ants, and we do that to sex workers all the time. And when we say prostitutes, we're saying it's a crime, but at the same time, there's a market for it. If there wasn't a market for it, there wouldn't be sex workers, right? So sex workers is a better term because it is work. It is work, right? that is actually work, you know. You may not think, a lot of people may not think it's work, but it's actually work, right? And there's a market for it. There are a lot of men, lots of men, a lot of them won't come clean, who, you know, use sex workers, whether they use them for lap dances or actual sex, you know, whatever. But there's a market for it. And it's actual work. So let's call it that, sex work.
Interesting. See, that's the I don't know what to call it, the socially progressive Dan Trez Omi. He's defending the hoes. I mean the sex workers.
and look again. We all have used it or are using it, right? If you watch porn, that's sex work, right? You know what I'm saying? And a lot of us like to think that, well, I don't, you know, I watch porn, but I don't go down the street and sleep with a sex worker, you know, or I go to the strip club and I do this and I don't get with those prostitutes on the corner. It's all sex work.
Yeah.
There's an industry for it, right? It's an industry for it. We all watch it. We all do it. We all get down some way or another. Why denigrate the people that actually work in that industry, right? So we should, you know, some of the onus should be put on us because we make that industry. There's a market for it, you know?
Interesting. Well, how does this message or this situation connect with the Me Too movement? Because tonight we're talking about hip hop and the Me Too movement. So how did the Me Tooers respond to the situation with Nicki? Because I don't follow Twitter a lot.
I know the Me Tooers, they deal with sexual assault and rape. They don't really deal with like what's the word I want to use? Slut shaming. Because what Nicki Minaj is doing is called slut shaming, right? They don't really deal with that. I know for a lot of victims of rape and abuse, sexual abuse, there is a lot of shaming, right? There's, you know, shaming and victim blaming. But what Nicki Minaj is doing is called slut shaming. So that's a totally different lane. But to answer your question, I don't think the Me Too movement has arrived at the shores of hip hop yet. I don't think that's happening. It's gonna happen, but it hasn't got there yet.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they've really arrived there yet, but I do agree that it's coming. I think that it's something that should happen. I think that it's unfortunate that it's going to happen. It's going to happen very bad. It's going to happen.
I don't see that. I mean, Russell Simmons ain't in trouble, right? Russell Simmons ain't in trouble
yet.
He's not going to be in trouble. He probably won't be in trouble. You know, he's not going to be in trouble. Matter of fact, that fool had a nerve to email Terry Crews, because, you know, Terry Crews got a case, and he asked Terry Crews to drop the case.
Interesting. How many ladies have come out against Russ?
Last time I checked, I think it was like 3. You know, one of them was interviewed. I think it was by the New Yorker, but I think it's 3 that came out. You know, but I mean, there's always been industry rumors that he was like that. There's always been industry rumors that he, you know, he was very, you know, sexually aggressive towards women, you know, groping, stuff like that, saying certain things. He was always known for that. You know what I mean? He was always known for that. So, to be honest, when the allegations came out, I wasn't surprised. So.
Okay. All right. So 3 women have come out with allegations against him. Who are some of the other figures in hip hop who have allegations of sexual misconduct or even rape?
We've talked about your boy. What's his name? We talked about it on here. We were joking about it. We were joking about how was it here? We were talking about how some of his lyrics were rapey. What's my man's name? Watch yourself. Tell me what you're working with. That guy. What's his name?
You talking about Mystical?
Mystical. Yeah, Mystical. You know, he went to jail for rape, and he just got arrested again. He's on a $1 million bond for rape. That happened last year. So he's back in jail for rape. But if you look at some of his lyrics, you know, like, they're pretty much about rape. You know, shout out to Deezus and Murrow. They were talking about how a lot of early 90s rap was very problematic. You know, Boogie Down Productions, 13 and Good. Remember that joint?
Yeah.
So like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's a lot of stuff in there, and some of that is that fiction. You know, we know about how a lot of times rappers had groupies and they had underage women backstage. You know, I've heard of that. You know, I've heard of that. You know, so, but I don't think, again, like I was stating earlier, I don't think Me Too has come to the shores of hip hop yet. You know.
Okay. So Starr.
Oh, hold on. Let me stop.
Okay.
We just had, you know, that gentleman, and I use that because, for lack of a better term, what is triple extension? He was just murdered.
Okay. Yes.
And he had a case pending against him. Now, here's the ill part. They took his music off of Spotify, right? This happened a couple weeks ago, and Kendrick Lamar threatened Spotify with pulling his music if they didn't put his music back on Spotify, right? So we know that happened. And, you know, Kendrick got a lot of flack for that. And then J. Cole caught a lot of flack because he was kind of like, hey, you know, he's a young man that got murdered. We should be careful what we say about him, respect the dead. He got dragged for that. And Jadena also got dragged for comparing him to Malcolm X, which was fucking insane. But, you know, it's Me Too has not come to the shores of hip hop, but it needs to come today. You know, matter of fact, let's take it a step further. We need to stop caping for these rapists, and we need to stop caping for these abusers. We really, really do. We really need to stop doing that. And that's what these men are doing. Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Jadena, that's the stuff that they're doing. We need to call them out on that.
Yeah, and they're doing things that were really the norm 10, 20 years ago. And through today's more conscious, more aware lens, while they may have been problematic back then, it's it's definitely on a whole nother level. So I know that Starr used to really love Brand Nubian.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Starr, we've talked before where you talked about how much you love certain hip-hop songs, but when you really thought about the lyrics, they didn't jive. You know, it just didn't settle well with you. Can you talk about some of those songs, and let's see if we need to, you know, get them ready for Me Too or not?
So my catalog is really like old school. I don't know if the songs, because you're gonna be talking about when I was growing up listening to hip hop and the duality of being a woman and being a Black woman of the culture, and almost sometimes feeling like you're in an abusive relationship. So I don't know that if I spoke on the particular songs that it would be relevant to now, but I can speak on the experience of what that felt like growing up in the culture and loving hip hop, but then, you know, being a woman and hearing this music that was misogynistic and sometimes, you know, just downright hateful, just hateful towards women. But it's a culture that you love, a culture that you identify with. I was talking to some people recently. So I started loving hip hop in second grade. And my first tape that I got, I was in fourth grade, and it was The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. And I tricked my granny into buying it for me. And I had heard Teenage Love, Children's Story, Hey Young World on the radio and Rap City and all of that. And then when I got the tape, and it was, you know, riddled.
And you heard Treat It Like a Prostitute.
It's a classic. I love it. I pulled it back out recently.
Man, you brought it back, Starr.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it was just like, whoa, I was a little girl. And then I'm hearing all the, you know, this whole other side here. So it was a lot of misogyny in that. And as I started buying more and more of the music, because I mean, I've always, I feel I've been like hypersensitive of racism, and you know, some gender things as well, and at a young age. And so it was just something all the time that you had to deal with, and constantly it was like you turn a blind eye. And so I remember by the time I got to about being 19 years old, and I was working with teenagers, like I'm 19 and I'm working with 12 to 17-year-olds. And a lot of them were boys. A lot of them were young men who kept coming to our program at the Urban League right in front of Curry Park. And back when it was in Norfolk. And we would talk to the young men, like we'd have rap sessions about the lyrics and how they were affected by the lyrics and breaking the lyrics down and everything. And you would see that it would resonate with them. But then, you know, what we always deal with, they go back and it's not being reinforced anywhere else. But what happened? What happened was one time I was driving in my car and I was blasting Nori. You know, I had Nori playing loud, and lo and behold, one of my teen boys rose up beside me in the car with, I guess, one of his friends, and I was like, so I stopped listening to hip hop totally. Like I took a hip hop sabbatical for like a year or two. Like I had to quit and just go into a certain space, like just the conflicting feeling that I felt about that. Like I love this culture. I love the rhythm. I love the beat. I love the way that we express ourselves. I love that it's ours. I love the rebellion. I love all of that. But then, you know, yet and still, like that was constantly that I was listening to, bitch, give me some head, give me some head, give me some, getting the head in the whip and not crashing it. And I mean, with no context of concern about the woman, like you're not getting head in the whip from your lady. It's like, you know, bitches are here to give me head. And so you know, it was just a feeling, or when you would go out to the club and the dance tracks or whatever and all of that. So, I mean, it's a lot to it, being a woman and growing up in the culture. Like I was conflicted a lot. And like I said, it's something that I began to love since I was in second grade. So.
Interesting.
And you know, I've heard a lot of women say that. I heard a lot of women say that, you know, being in hip hop culture is like being in an abusive relationship. I've heard that many times over. Highly recommend Joan Morgan's Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost, which she wrote that about 15 years ago, and she's the one that coined the term hip hop feminist. So she deals with that a lot in that book. They republished it. And she's actually coming out with a new book that's going to come out to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Lauryn Hill's miseducation of Lauryn Hill. So that's coming out. I think it comes out this summer. So, but Joan Morgan, she talks about that a lot in her writing. And again, she's considered the first hip hop feminist. So
interesting. I do think that as hip hop went lower, became more and more popular down south, and the down south artists became more and more popular, in worldwide, that crept deeper and deeper into the music. You talked about Nori.
Don't blame it on the South.
Thank you.
No. I'm using that as a time period. I'm I'm not saying it didn't happen before that, but it became like when I heard stuff like 3 6 Mafia, when I heard stuff like Eazy-E and NWA and BWA.
But that's West Coast.
I was like, whoa.
But NWA, Too Short, all of that, that's West Coast. And then what I just talked about with Slick Rick, that was New York. Like that was still, I guess, when hip hop was burgeoning. But you talk about a progression. I just think it was a progression of something that was already started. But NWA and Too Short, that's not the South. That's Cali. That's West Coast.
And actually, Boogie Down Productions, when they first came out, that was considered gangster rap.
Yeah, but when
the first album was considered gangster rap, they were, the P is still free because the crack costs money. I mean, come on, man. Like you could go back, PSK, that's Schoolie D. He was from Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a bad example. Boogie Down Productions, the P is free, because it was a cautionary tale about the situations that women who were who are addicted place themselves in as sex workers.
Of course, denigrating slut shaming sex workers. There you go. Bam. Thank you for that one. I didn't even peep that. Thank you for that.
I don't know if he was slut shaming. I'm just saying that idea of you know, hip hop music that may have been lowbrow. The idea that it came later is actually not true. It's always been there. Now it's a little bit more mainstream than it was, but I think that element has always been there. You know, the biggest issue with what they play on the radio is not that. My biggest issue is not that they only play that stuff. I think it's not balanced, and you know that's my thing. It should be balanced. You know, so right. You know, but that idea of that quote unquote lowbrow hip hop music has always been around. Now, and you know, I've always said that we've always had nice and smooths that were kind of just funky, but weren't lyrical. So yeah, my point is the time period. Maybe I need to be a little more specific. The time period when hip hop music stopped being so East Coast based. Okay, my bad. Then you'll start to see a lot more of what you would call slut shaming and other statements that may be considered denigrating to women. That became more and more popular. So, you know, of course you can talk about Slick Rick's Treated Like a Prostitute, but we can go to Rudy Ray Moore way before him.
True indeed.
It's always been there, but
it's always been there.
Becoming the norm. You know, when crunk music became, you know, like 3 6 Mafia and Tear the Club Up and all that time period, that's when it became like the norm. Mm-hmm. It was normal, and I can understand that women felt like they were in an abusive relationship because they truly were.
But I felt like that before then. And so I just feel like, again, by that time, the radio had started, like, radio had begun to change, and it had gotten into that point where it wasn't as local anymore, and you started hearing the same things over and over again. And I think hip hop became more commercialized and an agenda was there. But I feel like all those things were there before. Like NWA were misogynistic as hell. Yeah. And that predates the popularity of 3 6 Mafia. And I think what you're talking about, like the dark ages, what I call when the dark ages of mainstream hip hop started to come in, the Lil Jon and Yin Yang and Laffy Taffy era, is that what you're talking about?
Dark ages? That's interesting.
That's what I call it, the dark ages of mainstream.
Wow.
It was to me, it was like I didn't see a lot of redemptive qualities in that point in the mainstream hip hop at that time. Like it was the dark ages.
I think Chris Rock had in part of his stand-up, he talked about how hip hop has become more difficult to defend, right? And I think that's what you're referring to, Starr. At one point, it was just like, I really can't defend skeet, right? I can't defend that, right? I can defend Rakim, you know, I can defend, you know, Boogie Down Productions, but the skeet from the window to the wall, I can't defend that, right?
Yeah, because I mean, they stopped being lyrical and having any kind of message, because even as bad as I think what NWA helped usher in as far as misogyny is concerned, they still had some content in there in some of their music that was like social or political thrown in there. But like, yeah, that dark ages, what can we say? Like what light did they provide? Like we couldn't even be like, that's a bunch of garbage, but he's spitting. Like it was just no redemptive quality.
You know what? So we've had what is commonly called the classic age of hip hop. We have the backpack age of hip hop, and now we have
the dark
ages. Wow.
So one of the things that happens.
Quote me on that.
Okay. All right. Wow. One of the things that I see happening with the Me Too movement is they're not as focused as current. They go back. The Me Too movement.
Yeah, because it's dominated. Even though Tarana Burke started it, what's happening is centered around white women. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the problems with Me Too, that it's the white women have taken it and it's become their voice. When Tarana Burke was her focus was on poor women of color. That was her focus. And it's just people that run with it. So it seems like they're going after the Harvey Weinsteins and stuff. And you're right. You're definitely right.
Interesting. So who needs to be worried about Me Too?
Rapists and rape apologists and sex abusers. That's who you have to be
Why do you
worried about.
frame that like that, Seko? Like, who needs to be worried about it?
Yeah, I mean, because
what does the question mean? Like,
I think that Danny gave an appropriate answer. I probably would have answered it differently, but there were artists who performed what was their conscious of that time period, and they may have a different time, a different consciousness now, and they may actually be working for social change. They may not be involved in the music because at some point they said, you know what, I can't defend this anymore. I'm out of this. But they're going to get dragged. And so if you would consider them rape apologists or rapists, then those people who were involved in those type of acts, they need to say, hey, something got to be done because they're going to get touched. Me Too is going to come after them.
What's amazing to me?
I think it's
what's amazing to me is that
the most money first.
What's amazing to me is we think that there's this witch hunt, right? Like the Salem witch trials, right? Where they're just gonna grab any and anybody and burn them at the stake. That has not happened. That has not happened. Everybody that's been accused, right? Everybody that's been accused, multiple people have come out and said, yes, that person is guilty. No one has been. It's not a situation where it's a miscommunication. It's not a situation where there was a false accusation. They are going after people who have multiple victims, for several decades. They're gonna go after those people, right? And again, if you rape, right, sexually abuse, right, they're coming for you, as it should be, right? As it should be. You commit a crime, you should do the time, right? Rape apologists too. If you And there's a lot of rape apologists, right? There's a lot of them. There's a lot of people that the reason why Cosby was able to do the things that he did was because there was people that defended him. There are people that covered up for him. There are people that paid people off. There are people that have done X, Y, Z, send lawyers to people's houses. Those are all rape apologists. Should they be in trouble too? Yes, because they covered up a crime. If me and you rob a store, right, and we kill somebody, and I go to Clevis, we go to Clevis' house, and she helps hide the body, guess what? She's involved with that crime too, right? And that's how it should be, because that's how it would go down.
So,
right?
Like I just said,
but if you ain't doing anything,
they're going to go after the ones who committed the crimes first, and then there's going to be another group they're going after. You just called them the rape apologists.
Yes.
So, who in hip hop are the rape apologists and the others who purveyors of rape cultures that need to be worried?
But I think
a lot of people.
Let me get that. I think that this conversation is long overdue. Like when you talk about you and we say that that's like a white woman movement or whatever, because I'm not really, involved in that. I don't know much about that. But the hip hop community, this conversation is long overdue. And I think damn near every man in hip hop needs to be involved in this conversation in some kind of way. Like, I think it's long overdue. Like the fact that hasn't been called out and put out there. I mean, because
it has.
It has, but not really where real accountability has been.
Right.
You know why? It's crazy because, like, even today, I was listening when you go back to the young man who was murdered the other day, like the XXX Tentacion, whatever his name is. So I was listening to Joe Budden's podcast that I think they did like a day or two ago, and they were talking about him, the guy being killed or whatever, and they were very upset at the people who had negative things to say about it. And I'm like, there was no sympathy to the victims or for people who felt sympathy for the victims. Like, I at least feel if you're going to have the discussion about, okay, he died, he was young, it's sad that he was killed. But on the other hand, you at least have to say, but I understand, like, he committed if what they're saying is true, that is heinous, that is terrible, and it is
Very
not
heinous.
something that should be tolerated. You know, yes, a young person died and we're not happy about that, but we also aren't tolerating stomping out pregnant women or whatever it was that he did. And so none of that was brought home at all, really, to the extent that they were having sympathy for him. And I just feel this conversation, like, we don't even need to wait on Me Too. Like, the accountability needs to come down.
I agree.
And, you know, like, Black too, you know, color too, whatever. Like, we right now, we need to have this conversation because, I mean, it's toxic. I just think of I remember one time, you remember that little A. Marie song, Why Don't We Fall in Love?
Yeah.
So that was like my summer jam. Whatever year that song was out, and I loved it. And I got my cousin to like burn me a CD. This is when we were still burning CDs with that song on there. And it was like 2 minutes long. And it had like a Cameron remix on it. And I remember he was like, you'll get slaughtered and raped, camcordered and taped. And that was a part of that song. And I was livid about the fact that somebody could actually say that.
Right.
And still have a career, and it's okay. Like, I mean, it's just this conversation is like long overdue. And I feel every man in hip hop needs to be
Cameron,
accountable.
Cameron. You're on the list, bro. You're on the list, bro.
Call him out. Yeah.
And this is what I've been saying. Now, just to clarify some things, all the crazy things that XXXTentacion did, he was called on the carpet. But for some reason, I'll let you figure out what the reason is, the voice wasn't loud enough. I'll leave
Is
it
ever? Is it ever loud enough? Like, who in hip hop has actually been shunned or shut down based off of being violent towards women? And then the excuses come out, well, women listen to it too, and women dance to it too, and women buy it too. And I'm like, well, but we don't when we understand the concept of like internalized racism, and when that plays out, but we don't understand the concept. Like I said, I freaking love hip hop culture. It's a part of me. It was like as a child in second grade when I started seeing Salt and Pepper, and I mean, just, you know, Kane, just everybody from hip hop and that resonated with me being 6, 7, 8 years old. It was like, yo, that's me. I identify with them as a kid in Gadsden, Alabama. You know, I felt that. And then you love this culture, but it's saying hateful things about something that you are and is not protective of you. I mean, but whose career just got squashed as a result of them being
it hasn't happened yet.
Violent towards women.
It hasn't happened yet. I mean, at one point Rick Ross was called on the carpet for his "And You Don't Even Know" song when he talked about
the roofies, yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Dre beat up D Barnes. I remember that, and they just had him do some PSAs, and people were upset. People were upset that they
came out. His responses to that when the film came out were like very subpar to me.
Yep.
They were very.
They didn't even discuss it in the film. It wasn't even discussed in the film.
Yeah, I didn't even see that. I didn't go see it, but I know that he responded to that. Like in interviews, and I was like, those responses are very subpar. It was much something like, well, you know, I'm older now and I've lived and I've moved forward, and like he didn't say hands down that was wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, I feel for her. I apologize on behalf of all my female fans. It was just subpar. It was very.
The reason why you should watch the movie is a good example of how you whitewash a story.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
And that's because we were there when it happened.
Yeah. And
you watch the movie, you're like, wait a second, that didn't happen. Like, wait a second, that's not how that went down. And so if you weren't from that time, you wouldn't know. But that's a good example of how you whitewash something. It's really.
So they had the incident in the movie?
They did not.
Oh no, they did.
They did not. Don't get me wrong. They had the groupies and stuff like that, but they made it seem like they were like Public Enemy. They made it. They came off like Public Enemy. They came off as ex-gangsters who became public enemy. That's literally what that movie is. Don't get me wrong. Cinematography-wise, visually, it's an amazing movie. But it's a good example of how you whitewash. It's a very good example. And the reason why I want you to watch it, Starr, is because you remember that stuff, right? I remember that stuff. I remember the headlines. I remember that stuff. So to see it on TV, and I'm like, wait a second, see it on the screen, I'm like, wait a second, that's not how that went down. You just like, wait, that's not what happened. Wait, hold on. Whoa. And they made Dr. Dre and Ice Cube look like heroes, and they kind of like made Eazy-E kind of like the guy to step on. Like, I kind of felt like they really like did that. You got to watch it.
Yeah, you have some interesting points. I love the movie, but I was disturbed that aspect about D Barnes, because that hurt me, because I was in love with D Barnes. And when I realized, when I was notified that happened to her, I was aghast. I was so angry. So I was really disturbed that wasn't in the film. And I was glad that D kind of shared her story, and she allowed her social media to do some work for her. But I do agree. Cameron is somebody that we need to look at. Who else do we need to pull on the carpet? But one thing that I've learned, I used to be a rape crisis counselor, and I found and I learned that people who are abused sometimes become the abusers. So I think that we can frame this in a way where we can prevent further abuse so we won't create further abusers. So, and I think that's the direction that we need to address this in. So Cameron's number one. We talked about Dr. Dre. Is there anybody else? We have 2 minutes left. Anybody else that we need to put on the carpet? And then we need to do our work. We can't allow the Me Too movement to do it for us. We need to do it ourselves.
You're right.
I think it's almost damn near
pretty much.
Everybody's conversation needs to be had at large. I mean, some were more egregious than others, but it needs to be had at large, because why aren't more men mad about it? Like it happened and people weren't incensed. And then now, people had mothers, sisters, girlfriends, daughters, all of this. Like, why aren't more men mad about it? Why are you kind of just trying to, well, I'm not going to really say anything about it. Like, that's the thing at large to me, because it never should have gone that far. Like, nobody should be able to say you'll get slaughtered and raped, camcorded and taped, and then you still fraternize with them.
You're right. No, I agree with you 100%, Starr. It's a discussion that we need to have like yesterday, and men should be outraged.
Wow. Why aren't more men mad? That's a new hashtag, Starr.
I will say this, though. I will say this, though. I can answer that question.
To y'all, we are mad. You know what I'm saying? When harm is coming to you all, we are mad. We are out there. We are in mass. We are in front of cops and guns and everything. So why can't y'all just check your homie? Like, check your homie.
And that's why that is. That's why that is. The reason why is because if we start calling the people out, look. The CDC said 1 out of 5 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 1 out of 5, right? So who is doing that, right? And if I was to go to the barbershop today, walk into the barbershop, and I was to get a lie detector or some machine that, if I ask you a question to make you tell the truth, we're going to be locking a lot of them cats up. Some of them people we know and love.
Yeah. Right? All right, last word. 45 seconds. Starr, ladies first. Your last words.
More men need to be outraged, and it's time to bring this conversation to hip hop. Is long overdue.
Dan Trez, last words.
Ditto to Starr.
You notice we let the black woman say it first. As Danny always says. All right, Dan Trez. All right, Starr. We got to do better, fellas.
Yes, sir.
We need to get mad.
We love y'all. We go hard in the paint for y'all, so we need the same thing back.
Reciprocity. Yep.
Ashe.